Well, it's been an incredible weekend of news, some good, some bad, some almost completely unbelievable, which we will get to. But I want to start today with an incredible piece of reporting in Rolling Stone from Hunter Walker, where Hunter has put together story after story of the January 6th Trump rioters meeting with Republicans, with Trump White House staff. And it is all coming together to paint a very specific picture, which is that there were so many people involved in this thing, and mere expulsion from the House of Representatives would not be enough. But we'll get to that. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's start with the Rolling Stone piece. Hunter Walker writes, exclusive. January 6 protest organizers say they participated in, quote, dozens of planning meetings with members of Congress and White House staff. Two sources are communicating with House investigators and detailed a stunning series of allegations to Rolling Stone, including a promise of a blanket pardon from the Oval Office. This, if even 5% of this is as described, this is historic. Let's look. As the House investigation into the January 6th attacks heat up, some of the planners of the pro-Trump rallies that took place in Washington, D.C. have begun communicating with congressional investigators and sharing new information about what happened when the former president's supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol. Two of these people have spoken to Rolling Stone extensively in recent weeks and detailed explosive allegations that multiple members of Congress were intimately involved in planning both Trump's efforts to overturn his election loss and the January 6th events that turned violent. Rolling Stone separately confirmed a third person involved in the main January 6th rally has communicated with the committee. This is the first report that the committee is hearing major new allegations from potential cooperating witnesses. While there have been prior indications that members of Congress were involved, this is also the first account detailing their purported role and its scope. The two sources also claim they interacted with members of Trump's team, including former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, who they describe as having an opportunity to prevent the violence. Look at the scope of this. The two sources, both of whom have been granted anonymity due to the ongoing investigation, describe participating in dozens of planning briefings ahead of the big day when Trump supporters broke into the Capitol as his election loss to Joe Biden was being certified. Here we go. I remember Marjorie Taylor Greene specifically, the organizer says. I remember talking to probably close to a dozen other members at one point or another, or their staffs. For the sake of clarity, we will refer to one of the sources as a rally organizer and the other as a planner. Rolling Stone confirmed both sources were involved in organizing the main event aimed at objecting to the electoral certification, which took place at the White House Ellipse on January 6th. Trump spoke at that rally and encouraged his supporters to march to the Capitol. It then gets wild. Along with Greene, the conspiratorial pro-Trump Republican from Georgia who took office earlier this year, the pair both say the members who participated in these conversations or had top staffers join include Representative Paul Gosar from Arizona, Representative Lauren Boebert, Mo Brooks, Madison Cawthorn, Andy Biggs, and Louis Gohmert. It's a who's who of the most extreme members of Congress. We would talk to Boebert's team, Cawthorn's team, Gosar's team like back to back to back to back, says the organizer. Now look at this allegation. Gosar, one of the most prominent defenders of the rioters, allegedly took things a step further. Both sources say he dangled the possibility of a blanket pardon in an unrelated ongoing investigation to encourage them to plan the protests. Our impression was that it was a done deal, the organizer says, that he'd spoken to the president about it in the Oval, in a meeting about pardons, and that our names came up. They were working on submitting the paperwork and getting members of the House Freedom Caucus to sign on as a show of support. The organizer claims the pair received several assurances about the blanket pardon from Gosar. I was just going over the list of pardons, and we wanted to tell you guys how much we appreciate all the hard work you've been doing, Gosar said, according to the organizer. The rally planner describes the pardon as being offered while, quote, encouraging the staging of protests against the election. The allegation is pardons dangled in exchange for organizing the January 6th riots. Can you imagine? I would have done it either way, with or without the pardon, the organizer says. I do believe in this country, but to use something like that and put that out on the table when someone is so desperate, it's really not good business. Gozar's office did not respond to requests for the story. Rolling Stone separately obtained documentary evidence that both sources were in contact with Gozar and Boebert. They don't seem to be lying about that part. We are not describing the nature of that evidence to preserve their anonymity. And every paragraph is crazy. These specific members of Congress were involved in the pro-Trump activism around the election certification. Brooks and Cawthorn spoke with Trump at the Ellipse on January 6th. In his speech at that event, Brooks, who was reportedly wearing body armor, which why do you do that unless you suspect you might need it, declared today is the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass. Gozar, Green, and Boebert were billed as speakers at the wild protest, which took place on January 6th at the Capitol. Nick Dyer, who is Marjorie Taylor Greene's comms director, said she was solely involved in planning to object to the electoral certification on the House floor. Spokespeople for other members of Congress who the sources describe as involved in the planning for protests did not respond to requests for comment. It seems, folks, as if individuals here are lawyering up and being very, very careful. Very, very careful. By the way, we have video of some of these people admitting they were involved in planning. Now, they would say, well, we just planned a procedural objection. It's becoming harder and harder to believe that that's the limit of it. Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene coming out back in December of 2020. Listen. Man, she's gross.
Just finished with our meetings here at the White House this afternoon. We had a great planning session for our January 6th objection.
At the White House, planning for January 6th. Now, of course, you'll say, but we weren't planning for violence. No.
We aren't going to let this election be stolen by
Really?
Joe Biden and the Democrats.
Wow.
President Trump won by a landslide. Call your House reps, call your senators from your states. We've got to make sure they're on board, and we already have a lot of people engaged. Okay, stay tuned.
So this is one of the biggest revelations about the January 6th riots. It's really incredible work by Hunter Walker, who researched and wrote this piece for Rolling Stone. Pardons dangled. People who we already believed were involved or admit to have been coordinating events that day with the White House, allegedly doing far more than that. And it's, all of these folks are playing their roles. The Gozar pardon. Never trust a promise or an intimation from these people, especially if they're asking you to do something they wouldn't do, which Gozar had no interest in going to this thing. But Gozar was certainly interested in encouraging others by dangling a pardon which never came. Trump told his supporters, let's go to the Capitol right now. He went and then watched on TV. But he said, we're going down Pennsylvania Avenue. This story, this explosive story, was nowhere on Fox News this morning. Nowhere on foxnews.com. Maybe they'll mention it at some point, but like it didn't even happen is their approach so far. What should the consequences be? Well, let's talk about what AOC says. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is calling for the expulsion of Republicans involved in the planning of the Trump riot. We now have, as we talked about in the last segment, the allegations from 2/3 sources who spoke to Hunter Walker for Rolling Stone about the involvement of Marjorie Taylor Greene, Madison Cawthorn, Lauren Boebert, Paul Gozar, Louis Gohmert, Andy Biggs, maybe I'm forgetting one, in the planning of the January 6th protests, which turned riotous. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez now says anybody who's involved should be kicked out of the House of Representatives, kicked out of Congress. A Newsweek reporting, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called for the expulsion of any member of Congress who helped plan the storming of the U.S. Capitol after a bombshell report alleged that several Republican lawmakers had coordinated with rally organizers. Her comment came after a Rolling Stone report published Sunday night claimed multiple members had been intimately involved in the planning of former President Donald Trump's efforts to overturn his election loss and the January 6th protests, which culminated in the violence at the U.S. Capitol. She tweeted, quote, "Any member of Congress who helped plot a terrorist attack on our nation's capital must be expelled. This was a terror attack, 138 injured, almost 10 dead. Those responsible remain a danger to our democracy, our country, and human life in the vicinity of our capital and beyond." Now, I would actually go a step further. Expulsion actually isn't enough. AOC can only deal with the expulsion part because she's not law enforcement. She's a legislator, but it actually isn't enough. We should be talking about criminal charges here, if applicable, when the evidence points to that. What I mean is there should not be criminal charges. No, because these are members of Congress. It needs to be looked at as if these were any other people. Now, realistically, we're not going to see the expulsion. AOC's right. We should see it. We're not going to see it. It would take a 2/3 vote to expel any member. This will never happen given the narrow margins. Instead, what probably needs to happen is the prosecution needs to happen. And then that will make these folks ineligible in theory if convicted and immediately removed. It's easier, I believe, to convince, I don't know if it would be 6 people or if these would be 12 person, probably 12-person juries, although, it depends on a lot of particulars. It's easier to convince 12 people off the street than it would be to convince highly partisan actors in the House of Representatives to vote to expel their own to their own detriment by flipping the balance of power further against their own party. So that's just a reality. AOC completely right. We are only in stage like 0.1 in figuring out what the fallout and what the repercussions are going to be from these incredible allegations based on this Rolling Stone piece by Hunter Walker. But AOC completely right. Law enforcement and the justice system needs to be ready to go as well. These people deserve to go down for this. And one of the real problems that makes me worried there's likely to be more of this the next time they don't like an election result is that there have not been serious consequences. Yes, we've started to see some verdicts. And okay, there are people who are going to have to do a few years. But for the political figures involved, no consequences whatsoever. And we're going to now see if this will push things over the edge. We know that this congressional committee has been investigating and looking at this evidence, but is law enforcement looking at it? Is the Department of Justice looking at it? Joe Biden shouldn't get involved the way he hasn't, but it should be looked at. We're going to follow it. Let me know your thoughts about all of this via Twitter, where you can find me at @dpacman on Twitter. All right, I am going to talk about the absolutely horrifying situation involving the actor Alec Baldwin, who accidentally shot someone to death on the set of the film Rust. It's almost an inconceivable headline. Actor Alec Baldwin shot someone to death and injured another person with a gun on the set of a movie. But that's what's happened. And over the weekend, we've gotten, I guess I would like to say, some more clarity, although it's still not exactly clear what happened down to the detail, but we have increasingly a general understanding of it. So let's look at the latest report from the Associated Press. An assistant director unwittingly handed Alec Baldwin a loaded weapon and told him it was safe to use in the moments before the actor fatally shot a cinematographer. Cold gun, the assistant director announced, according to a search warrant filed in a Santa Fe court. Instead, the gun was loaded with live rounds, and when Baldwin pulled the trigger Thursday on the set of a Western, he killed cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. Director Joel Souza, standing behind her, was wounded. The Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office obtained the warrant Friday so investigators could document the scene at the ranch outside Santa Fe, where the shooting took place. They sought to examine Baldwin's blood-stained costume for the film Rust, as well as the weapon that was fired, other prop guns, ammunition, and footage that might exist. The gun was one of 3 that the film's armorer, Hannah Gutierrez, had set on a cart outside the wooden structure where a scene was being acted. Assistant director Dave Halls grabbed the gun from the cart, brought it inside to Baldwin, unaware it was loaded with live rounds. It was unclear how many rounds were fired. Gutierrez removed a shell casing from the gun after the shooting, and she turned the weapon over to police when they arrived. Halls did not immediately return phone and email messages. The AP was unable to contact Gutierrez. Several messages sent to production companies were not immediately returned. The film's script supervisor, Mamie Mitchell, said she was standing next to Hutchins when she was shot. I ran out and called 911 and said, bring everybody, send everybody. This woman is gone at the beginning of her career. Mitchell said she and other crew members were attending a private memorial service. Baldwin described the killing as a tragic accident. There are no words to convey my shock and sadness regarding the tragic accident that took the life of Halyna Hutchins, a wife, mother, and deeply admired colleague of ours. I am fully cooperating with the police investigation. My heart is broken for her husband, their son, and all who knew and loved Halyna. No charges immediately filed. I know that the New York Post, for example, which is a Fox, News Corporation / Fox News publication, has been talking about manslaughter charges against Baldwin. If you look at the article, it's sort of like based on what one legal expert theorizes. It's speculative. We just don't know about that at this point in time. The question that's not been answered is, why were there any live rounds on the set? And initially there was the belief that there was a blank, and you can hurt someone with a blank if you're right next to them, that this was a blank and a tragedy, an accident involving a blank. Now we've learned, at least it's being said, it was a live round. And so then the question is, why were there live rounds there? There may be some explanation, but we have not yet gotten an answer. Another article from CNN, Rust director told authorities Alec Baldwin was practicing drawing his gun when the weapon discharged. The shot that killed a cinematographer on a New Mexico film set last week was fired as actor Alec Baldwin was practicing drawing his gun, according to the director who was injured in the shooting. Listen, I know that there are people who, because Alec Baldwin is a left-winger and played Trump on Saturday Night Live, and there's a lot of right-wing people angry with, they just hate Alec Baldwin. They are saying Alec Baldwin has committed a crime or is to blame here. Now, you can slice and dice this a lot of different ways. Like, for example, there was one argument that went like this. I'm going to give you the argument. This is not my argument. And it was Alec Baldwin is ultimately to blame because even if someone else made a mistake by putting a live round in a gun, even if someone else made a mistake by handing Alec Baldwin a hot gun and saying it's a cold gun, Alec Baldwin shouldn't even have had his finger on the trigger. Like, what if you're on set and you're practicing, you just never put your finger on the trigger, period. So ultimately it's Alec Baldwin's fault. It strikes me as a bit of a stretch. If an investigation reveals Alec Baldwin should be charged with something, I'm not going to get in the way, believe me. But my instinct is, why was there a live round at all? And if there was, why was Alec Baldwin given a gun, allegedly, and told that it was a cold gun, not a hot gun? That's my initial reaction. Now, in terms of what this does to Alec Baldwin now, psychologically, for the rest of his life, I can't even imagine. I'm not saying he's the victim. I'm not calling him a victim. But if he was given a gun and told this is a cold gun and it has a live round, and then now you've killed someone, it's impossible to even think about. It's impossible to even conceive of. And so there's going to be an investigation. At some point, we will know more. We've already seen in the first few days, could have been a blank. It was an accident with a blank. No, it was a live round. At one point, both stories were out. There's going to be more information coming, and we'll wait and see what that is. But just a horrifying situation and a tragedy, because someone was killed and someone was injured. It would be bad enough if there was just an accident with a gun on a set. This is now beyond that, and it's a tragic accident as life was lost. And I'm curious to hear what folks in the audience think. And for me, Alec Baldwin's politics play no role in my assessment of this whatsoever. Just none whatsoever. Curious to hear from you. We got a call from a viewer last week who brought up China and a discussion of the portrayal of China in American media. And during that conversation, during that phone call, we talked about xenophobia towards Asian Americans over COVID. We talked about intellectual property theft and a few other topics. And I got a very good email from Thomas over the weekend. And Thomas said to me, David, there is a China story to talk about, but it's not really what the caller brought up. Intellectual property theft, it's an issue. It's not the major geopolitical issue with China. There's no real evidence that China intentionally released COVID as a bioweapon. So that's not really like the big story with China. Yes, xenophobia against Asian Americans for real or perceived misdeeds by China is something we should be against. We're not going to be xenophobic against Asian Americans because of something the Chinese government did. That's happening and that's bad. But Thomas wrote, there are real issues with the Chinese Communist Party. Now, that's another issue to clarify. The CCP and China, as in Chinese people, are two different things. We're really talking about the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party. And as Thomas wrote to me, there's a ton of negativity towards China in general that's very surface level. Some of it is based in plain old bigotry. Some of it is peddled by U.S. media. But there are many real reasons to be at odds with the actions of the Chinese Communist Party. So let's look at the real concerns with the Chinese government, the CCP. And these are not reasons to go to war with China. Caveat, I'm not suggesting war. I know that there's people possibly on the revolutionary left who will see this segment and say, I'm calling for another American military intervention. No, I'm not even saying these are reasons to no longer trade with China. If we stop trading with China, it would be disastrous for the American economy as it's currently set up. We're just going to talk about issues with the Chinese government. First, the ongoing Uyghur genocide. Uyghurs are a Muslim ethnic minority in China. China has been credibly accused of committing crimes against humanity, possibly genocide against the Uyghur population and other mostly Muslim ethnic groups in the northwest region of Xinjiang. Leading human rights groups, including Amnesty and Human Rights Watch, have put out reports accusing China of crimes against humanity for their actions. There are re-education camps. There are horrifying things, and much has been written about it. That's a real substantive issue with the Chinese government. Second, organ harvesting. This is all if you put a positive spin on it, this is, we get organ donations from prisoners who have died of natural causes. That's the story that China would tell. But a tribunal ruled in 2020 that China is forcibly harvesting organs from prisoners who certainly didn't volunteer to donate organs. But it goes even further, possibly even prisoners who were killed for organs, not who have died naturally. The number of transplant centers in China has gone up over 300%. Wait times for organs have come down dramatically. It's not clear why. China doesn't have much in terms of an organized organ donation program. How has it happened? It seems this is a likely explanation, and it is absolutely horrifying. Note that back in 2012, a top Chinese official said China is going to phase out the practice of taking organs from prisoners who have been executed. As of 2020, we believe that that's still going on. Even if it's not, aside from executed, there's a lot of other ways that you can accelerate the process of obtaining organs from prisoners. It seems that that's being done. Absolutely horrifying. Number 3, China so poorly mismanages its own infrastructure that it likely has led to hundreds or more Chinese people. It's hard to get real numbers from the CCP to die due to flooding. And the idea here is that, yes, there have been heavy rainstorms that are not man-made, right? Humans didn't make the rainstorms. But there are serious allegations that the deaths are a result of this infrastructure madness craze in China, where money is poured into projects that look good, sometimes generate returns for people. But meanwhile, simple infrastructure that could be improved to prevent senseless death from heavy rains and people drowning are ignored. Okay, complete mismanagement. That's a real criticism of what's being done. And then such corruption from the CCP that causes all sorts of problems, massive fraud, embezzlement around these half-finished villages where people make a ton of money. The projects are abandoned after the contracts and the cash are handed out, as well as reconstruction projects that never really happen, although many people get rich from them. And then lastly, and this is a really big deal, China's continued aggressive posturing towards India, Taiwan, and the South and East China Seas more generally, each of which we've talked about a little bit in the past. So on India, there have been somewhere between 4 and 10 skirmishes of note between India and China over the border, various face-offs. We've talked about it a little bit on the bonus show before. The situation in the South China Sea involving China, the Philippines, and Vietnam, where you see military activity by China, naval maneuvers, other aggression, outposts being built, concerning. And then also conflicts with Japan in the East China Sea, other part of the sea. It includes Japan having scrambled jets in the past and other escalations. So to be clear, again, I want to be really careful. I don't want war with China. I'm not saying invade China. I'm not saying the U.S. doesn't also do bad things. Lots of countries exhibit this type of aggression. The difference is, number one, a lot of the criticisms of China in the U.S. media and from, people like Trump have been very surface level and lead to xenophobia against Asian Americans, which has no place whatsoever. There are actual horrible things being done by the Chinese government. Many countries that also want to do horrible things don't have both the aggression and the means to carry it out, the financial resources at their disposal, the massive population that China has. Bigotry against Asian Americans because of this or Chinese people anywhere is wrong, and we're against it. I'm also not saying cut off China from an economic standpoint. Our economy is now too intertwined with China's. It would take a really long time to be able to unentangle that relationship without destroying the American economy. So I'm not calling for that, but there are real geopolitical issues here and humanitarian issues about which we should be concerned. It's not bigotry to talk about that. And the American media rarely touches these actual issues. Let me know what you think. We'll have more on this story on the David Pakman Show Instagram, which you can find at David Pakman Show on Instagram. All right, so I know that by doing this story, I'm going to get a whole rash of trolls from the left saying, oh my God, David, how can you praise Barack Obama? He's a centrist neoliberal. He's terrible. His drone policy, his deportations. And of course, I've criticized all of those things, but that doesn't mean that we can't look at Barack Obama speaking at a rally and realize, wow, the political discourse has really collapsed over the last 5 years, in particular, as the virus of Trumpism has degraded and coarsened political dialogue. We can't say, wow, that's actually a uniquely talented political speaker, Barack Obama. Doesn't mean we liked what he did with drones or surveillance. So let's get to it. And please don't read into this segment more than what I'm actually saying. There's a bunch of important elections next Tuesday, November 2nd. I'm going to be covering results live with you on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook starting around 8 p.m. Eastern on next Tuesday night. One of those races is the Virginia gubernatorial election. Now, in this race, incumbent Democratic Governor Ralph Northam is term limited out. So it's a race between two challengers. It's Democratic candidate Terry McAuliffe and absolutely dangerous right-wing Republican Glenn Youngkin. Youngkin is a real lunatic. I mean, a true political and cultural extremist. Youngkin has made clear his allegiance to Donald Trump and Trumpism initially, although he's since kind of backed away because it seems like maybe it's not going to help him that much. Youngkin for months didn't even acknowledge that Joe Biden legitimately won the 2020 election. It's that crazy of a guy. He's against abortion and he's against gun safety measures. He's really, really horrible. The race is tight. It's within the margin of error. I could show you polls, 1 point, 2 points. Doesn't matter. It's within the margin of error. It could go either way. So former President Barack Obama has been out campaigning with Terry McAuliffe. And in a very specific sense, it was really refreshing. Not because I like Barack Obama's drone policy or whatever, but because Barack Obama was able to do something that often gets lost when we're in the day-to-day of the current right-wing insanity and extremism. And it's one crazy thing after another, which is Barack Obama distilled just how absurd the modern Republican Party and American right wing has gotten. So let's look at some clips. In this first one, this is like a classic Obama thing where he hits a bunch of issues about the hypocrisy of Glenn Youngkin, and he touches on opportunism and other things. He starts with some jokes and builds into, hey, guys, this is really serious. This is like a textbook 2-minute political speech excerpt. And it's interesting to look at it and see.
Yeah, the guy can hoop. That's great. I'm less convinced that the co-CEO of one of the largest private equity firms in the world spends his time washing dishes and going grocery shopping but who knows? Maybe. But I mean, you do notice that, like, whenever a wealthy person runs for office, they always want to show you what a regular guy they are.
So he starts with the jokes, and I know people are saying, well, Obama's rich too. Yeah, right. This is political speech. This is about what are the policies and making a connection to that. Yes, Obama's also incredibly wealthy.
But that's okay. But when your supporters hold a rally where they pledge allegiance to a flag that was flown at the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th.
So he's doing two things here. He's starting to shift from the jokes to the serious, and he's slowing down the speed. And then at the end, he'll build back up, but instead of with jokes, with anger that he wants the crowd to feel with him. It's really textbook.
Hey, the biggest threat to our democracy in my lifetime, when you don't separate yourselves from them, when you don't think that's a problem, well, you know what? That's a problem. You can't run ads telling me you're a regular old hoops playing, dishwashing, fleece wearing guy, but quietly cultivate support from those who seek to tear down our democracy. Either he actually believes in the same conspiracy theories that resulted in a mob, or he doesn't believe it, but he's willing to go along with it, to say or do anything to get elected. And maybe that's worse. Because that says something about character.
And then now here's the final build-up.
Character will end up showing when you actually are in office. What are you willing to stand up for? When are you willing to say no to your own supporters? When are you willing to say there's some things that are more important than getting elected, and maybe American democracy is one of those things?
So that is really well done political speech. You don't have to love Barack Obama's politics or whatever. This is a really great technique of starting with jokes and chuckles, and then you slow down and you start to get serious. And then once you have the audience with you, you then build up to exactly how Barack Obama finishes that, into getting people to feel about Glenn Youngkin the way they should. I mean, we should be outraged about this disgusting guy. This is a really notable skill that Barack Obama has. And whatever your thoughts are about him, we have to recognize being really good at something. And that 2-minute clip is such an example of someone that is really at the top of their field in being able to deliver this kind of speech. In this, I'm going to do one more clip here. In this clip, very concisely characterizing the right-wing culture war as a phony, trumped-up culture war designed to create outrage. I like this just because it's a great assessment of what we've been saying for a long time. They're not doing policy. They're just trying to get people fired up with these cultural issues.
We don't have time to be wasting on these phony, trumped-up culture wars, this fake outrage that the right-wing media peddles to juice their ratings. And the fact that he's willing to go along with it instead of talking about serious problems that actually affect serious people, that's a shame. That's not what this election's about. That's not what you need, Virginia. Instead of forcing our communities to cut back at a time when we're just starting to recover, we should be doing more to support people who are educating our kids and keeping our neighborhoods safe.
So you guys get it. A very, very highly skilled political orator. His drone program was horrible. The surveillance was horrible. I'm with you. But glad to see him out campaigning for Terry McAuliffe. I would say this is the biggest race on the ballot next Tuesday. If you live in Virginia, make sure you're getting out and voting. The difference between Terry McAuliffe, an admittedly establishment Democrat, no doubt about it, versus Glenn Youngkin, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, could not be more different. And we're going to have live results for you 8 days from today. I hope you'll join me 8 p.m. Eastern, 8 days from today with results. I want to play for you an incredible clip. I just love this. This is so good. There is an activist and student at Dartmouth College named, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, Jack Cocciarella. He went to an event with radical extremist Republican Congressman Madison Cawthorn, who continues to claim that Donald Trump actually won the election in 2020. And our friend Jack confronted Madison, and it's really hero's work. This was at Dartmouth. Cawthorn is reduced to a stammering mess, unable to put together a coherent explanation to defend his position. Let's go right to the video. This is really, really good.
So I just had a quick question for you, Congressman Cawthorn. A majority of Republicans believe that President Biden was not lawfully elected. Now, you know that he was, and that he won the 2020 election. So when will you stop lying to your constituents, admit that Donald Trump lost, and end this senseless attack on our democracy?
So first of all, it's a loaded framing of the question, but for the format, for what Jack's trying to do, it's absolutely perfect.
Well, number one, I completely wholeheartedly disagree with you. I believe the election.
On the facts, you disagree with me?
On what was that?
On the facts that President Biden was lawfully elected?
Absolutely. Well, let me go into it right quick. There is an unconstitutional election.
Love to hear you propagate the big lies.
Would you like to?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, so as you can all see in Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution, the only people who have a right to change election law in the United States of America are the state legislatures. You saw in 6 key states, namely Wisconsin and Arizona, as the worst perpetrators. The state, the state governors and the
Now wait, hold on. Who was it that did the illegal thing that, of course, does not mean that Donald Trump? Wait, was it the governors? I don't know. No, yeah, Trump definitely won.
Board of Elections there, who actually went around the will of the state legislature.
Wait a second. So was it the will of the people or was it the will of the state legislature? Wait, what was violated exactly, Madison?
Change election laws on their own. That is unconstitutional. When you have voter drop boxes that are set up in parks, when you can get rid of signature verification and voter identification laws, that is against the law. It's an unconstitutional thing. Are you against the Constitution?
Are you against when you incited the January 6th insurrection? Were you against the Constitution? When you incited the January 6th insurrection, were you against the Constitution? Or were you for it?
Man, this kid's got upper management written all over him. Jack Cocciarella, really, really well done. And of course, the stuff that Madison Cawthorn is saying, we've heard it so many times before, and it's sort of a gish gallop when you throw it all together. Well, it was against the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, and the states changed the rules, and it wasn't the will of the people, but it wasn't the will of the legislatures, but actually it was the legislatures who changed. And when you put a drop box in a park or change the message, hold on a second. How does this mean Trump won? Let's look at these issues one by one by one. And listen, this Cawthorn, he has his talking points prepared, right? He's been perpetrating this lie and perpetuating the talking points for a while now. So he knows the talking points, but in a format where you can really take them one by one and pick them apart, you see that there's nothing there. Every single one of these liars should be questioned, and they should be facing exactly these questions every time they appear in public. Explain exactly how it is that Trump won. Number 2, explain exactly how you talk about the Constitution in terms of the election, but you never mentioned the anti-constitutional attempt by the January 6th rioters to stop the certification. Are you for or against that? Explain it. It should become impossible for these people to evade these questions every time they're in public. And a really, really great job there by Jack Cocciarella, a Generation Z activist and student at Dartmouth College. And my guess is we'll be hearing more from him. And hopefully, I mean, at every town hall, at every opportunity, these people should be asked these questions. You've got to be prepared. You've got to be prepared with rebuttals because they're going to have some rebuttals. But really, really nice job. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back after this. Okay, this is really great. For weeks now, I've been reminding you every time we talk about Fox News criticizing various vaccine requirements at different companies. I've been reminding you, Fox News has a stricter vaccine mandate than the one that Joe Biden has proposed for companies with 100 or more employees. As we watched Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham and Dan Bongino criticize the requirements outlined by Joe Biden that all sorts of different companies have adopted, sports teams, airlines, other organizations, Fox News hosts would not mention, hey, our mandate here at Fox is even stricter. Joe Biden said get vaccinated or test weekly. Fox News is doing get vaccinated or test daily and wear a mask around other employees if you're not vaccinated. Fox News hosts wouldn't mention it. They would just talk about vaccine mandates. It's terrible. They wouldn't mention, by the way, where we work, it's even stricter. Last week, during his CNN town hall, which we covered live, Joe Biden actually brought this up. Joe Biden actually said, hey, there's this cynical, hypocritical Fox coverage of vaccination. They have a mandate. OK, so take a look at Joe Biden mentioning that.
You know what I find fascinating? I turn on Fox to find out how popular I am. But
how are you doing there?
I'm doing very well. I think I'm at 3% favorable. But all kidding aside, one of the things I find, do you realize they mandate vaccinations?
At Fox headquarters.
Yeah. I find that mildly fascinating.
You find that mildly fascinating?
Mildly fascinating.
Now, that is absolutely true. They mandate with the option of testing out, just like Joe Biden proposed, except at Fox, if you want to test out, you've got to test daily instead of weekly. This now pushed Fox News into needing to comment on it. They can't just pretend it's not going on. And their reaction is just to lie and play a meaningless semantic game that is completely bogus. So take a look at what the Fox and Friends crew said the next morning about their own mandate.
The misinformation he said about Fox. He thought it says, I think it's funny that Fox has a vaccine mandate. You have a testing option at Fox. So what he said is totally inaccurate.
We don't have a mandate. We have a protocol.
Right.
Protocol.
That's a little different. So what you tell the president?
We don't have a mandate here, says Steve Doocy. We have a protocol. Why? Because you can test instead of getting vaccinated. But that's exactly what Joe Biden proposed. Joe Biden said, vaccinate or test weekly. And Fox says vaccinate or test daily and wear a mask. And here's why it's not a mandate, but it's a protocol is so silly. Just look at what the words mean. A mandate is an official order or commission to do something. Well, Joe Biden's order is you vaccinate or test weekly. So by that definition, it's a mandate. Fox News's order is vaccinate or test daily. That's a mandate by this definition. It's a mandate. Now, a protocol is the accepted or established code of procedure or behavior in a group, organization, or situation. Okay, so let's look at protocol. Joe Biden's established code of procedure is that you vaccinate or you test weekly. It's a protocol. Fox News's established code of procedure is you vaccinate or you test daily. It's a protocol. They are both mandates of a particular protocol. This is meaningless semantic trash. And I tweeted about this over the weekend. I said, so apparently Biden's required vaccine or required weekly testing is a mandate, but Fox News's required vaccine or required daily testing is a protocol. And I received a ton of really great responses. But one Twitter user, Diddy Trek 1, lays it out the way that I did here, saying a protocol and a mandate are synonymous. Both mean something has to happen. Policy is also synonymous with mandate and protocol, and that is exactly correct. So this shouldn't surprise us. These are just hypocrites. These are people who mostly want to keep their jobs. Even as Dan Bongino was saying, I may quit. Dan Bongino's thing with I think it was Cumulus Radio Networks, although he has a show on Fox and a show with a radio network. It might be Cumulus. He was saying, listen, I'm vaccinated, but I'm against any vaccine requirements. So I may quit my job here, depending on what happens. He hasn't mentioned the fact that he's also an employee at Fox, which has one of the strictest requirements. Now, there are some employers that have gone further and they've said, we just don't want to deal with the testing. Or we don't want to offer a testing option. We just want everybody vaccinated. That's it. And certainly that's their prerogative and something they can legally do. That's not actually what Joe Biden proposed for companies of 100 or more employees. And what Fox News has gone out of its way to do is something that's even stricter. I have a friend who recently started work at a West Coast based startup. And during the hiring process, even right there when you apply, it says everybody on our staff has to be fully vaccinated. This allows us to do in-person events where we just test everybody on the way in, and we've got these 2 layers. Everybody's vaccinated and tested. We can do stuff, and they do things. Just don't apply. If you're not willing to be fully vaccinated by the time you start, just don't apply. And much like, hey, this job requires you to work 2 overnights a week. Oh, I don't want that. I'm not going to apply. Fine. You're told up front. That is something companies can certainly do, but that's not even what's actually being discussed when we talk about the Joe Biden requirements. So it's great that Joe Biden mentioning it during the town hall Thursday pushed Fox hosts to start talking about it. Their reaction is so bogus. Their explanation is so pathetic and it's semantics at the end. It shouldn't really surprise us, and we'll see. My guess is that there's going to be more commentary on this from them. We have now, as predicted, another new goalpost, another new deadline from MyPillow CEO and founder Mike Lindell. We call him Mike Pillow. The latest is the Tuesday or the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So last month, our friend Zach Petrizzo from Salon wrote this article. Mike Lindell moves the reinstatement goalposts again. Now Trump will be back by Thanksgiving. That is locked in stone, everybody, says my Pillow guy, despite no evidence, no paperwork, and no legal case. Pillow executive turned election truther Lindell has revised his prediction yet again as to when the U.S. Supreme Court will hear his undisclosed legal argument that the 2020 election should be overturned. Lindell made an excited announcement that his mysterious legal team has fast-tracked internal research, claiming that his thus far imaginary Supreme Court case is now ahead of schedule. This is last month, remember. This is the big announcement, everyone, he said to Steve Bannon. I made a promise to this country that with all the evidence I have that we would get it to the Supreme Court, and I predicted they would vote 9-0 to look at the evidence. He then asserted that before Thanksgiving, which falls on November 25, the court will have heard his case. Now, he admits, originally I hoped for August and September. I asked all the lawyers yesterday. We're taking this to the Supreme Court before Thanksgiving. Okay. There is now a new clip of Pillow talking to Mike Lindell just a few days ago. It's now still before Thanksgiving, but it's only now going to be that an attorney general will be supporting this going to the Supreme Court by Thanksgiving. So it's another backtracking. First, it was by Thanksgiving, the Supreme Court will have voted to take the case and hear the evidence. Now it's I'll have an AG supporting me by, I guess it's the Tuesday or the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Take a listen to this.
Tuesday before Thanksgiving, you're going to have an AG that's prepared to go. You're going to have the lawsuit filed.
Yes,
and then you're going to start that evening or the next day a marathon of information on Frank's speech.
Wednesday night before Thanksgiving.
Tuesday.
Is this sad, or is it funny, or is it stupid, or is it all of the above? Remember, after the November of 2020, it's a year ago, guys. It's a year ago at this point. It'll be more than a year by the time Thanksgiving comes around, if we survive long enough to make it to Thanksgiving. First, it was, guys, between today, when it was November, between today, November 8th, I think it was when the media called it for Joe Biden. Between today, November 8th, and December 14th, the day that the electors certify in each state, this is going to be flipped to Trump, or Prump, as some of them would say. Didn't happen. Okay. Between today, December 14th, and January 6th, when Congress counts the votes, this is going to be flipped to Trump. They're going to stop the counting on January 6th. We know how that turned out. Riotous coup insurrection attempt in Washington, D.C., 400 people arrested, roughly 300, 400, something like that. Okay, didn't go well. Fine. Between January 7 and January, was it 20th or 21st? That was the that was Inauguration Day. Now I actually don't remember. Let me look at my January calendar. It was the 20th. Okay. between the riot and Inauguration Day, it's going to go to Biden. Didn't happen. Okay, well, then they started to fork. Some said, all right, it's going to be between January 20th and March or April. Others said, we succeeded. It's not the real Joe Biden that became president. It's the real Joe Biden's dead. It started to get even crazier. And then, April became early summer, and then it became 4th of July, and then it became August, and then it became the fall. And now it's going to be Thanksgiving, but not really Thanksgiving. There will be support from the Attorney General for the Supreme Court case, and the Supreme Court case will come at some point thereafter. What I said in November is expect this to keep going and going and going until at a certain point it becomes, listen, guys, the way to really do this is going to be by winning the midterms. If we win the midterms, then we'll put Donald Trump back in. And then even if they win the midterms, Trump's not coming back in. So then it'll be, well, now that we've won the midterms, let's just elect Donald Trump in 2024. That's the sequence. And there's going to be grifting and trying to grab cash throughout the entire thing. Candidates trying to grab cash by saying, give me money to win, to then bring Trump back, or to finally deal. They'll speak in coded language to really deal with the stolen election once and for all. But eventually it's just going to be, the way to get Trump back in is to elect him in 2024, which we have been saying all along. We knew all along that would be the case. So no surprise here. Mike Pillow as pathetic as ever. We have a voicemail number, and that number is 219-2 David This is really funny. Someone called in on a live stream a couple months ago. I recommended a particular ice cream. This is a fantastic ice cream. The brand is called, it's either Grayton's or Grater's. Let me actually see. I want to get it right. Is it Grayton's ice cream? Grayton's ice. This is not a sponsor. Grater's. Okay. Grater's ice cream. I've been a lifelong Cherry Garcia fan, but I don't think it's actually that great. I just didn't know of other cherry ice creams. Grayton's Black Cherry Chocolate Chunk Ice Cream. Maybe the best ice cream I've ever had. I mentioned it on the show. All sorts of people now are obsessed with this ice cream. Take a listen to this.
Hi, David. I've been a member for, over a year.
Yeah.
But I wanted to tell you, I tried on your recommendation, Grater's Black Cherry Ice Cream, and it's excellent.
Yep.
It beats Cherry Garcia out of the water.
Absolutely.
Can you beat something out of the water? Thanks for everything you do. I appreciate your time, and everything that you do for us. I appreciate it. Take care. Bye.
Yesterday, I tried to get myself some of this Grater's Black Cherry Chocolate Chip Ice Cream. It's the one flavor that was gone from the Grater's shelf. I went to my grocery store and I said, sir, where's the ice cream? They said, here it is, sir. And there was Grater's, and they had black raspberry, and they had vanilla. And then I just see an empty space, and I look at the tag, and it says black cherry. The black cherry is sold out. I'm not taking responsibility for this. I think I stumbled upon this as many other people were stumbling upon it as well. But I can't get my hands on the black cherry ice cream. So in the future, I'm not going to be mentioning any products that I'm interested in buying because it doesn't seem to be going super well in terms of my ability to get them. But fantastic ice cream, not a sponsor, just good ice cream. And I think like a dozen people have told me, David, this ice cream's amazing. We've got a great bonus show for you today. The Fed plans to ban policymakers from owning individual stocks. And this is an issue we've been talking about for a long time, the personal financial interests of members of Congress. Number two, Ron DeSantis, radical Trumpian Florida Republican governor of Florida and Florida, which makes it even crazier. He's going to give $5,000 signing bonus, or wants to unvaccinated police that are quitting other police departments in other states to come be cops in Florida. Okay. And then lastly, Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who offered to start handing out rewards for people who find voter fraud. He has finally paid out his first reward to a Democrat for identifying voter fraud carried out by a Republican. You love to see it. You really love to see it. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Sign up at joinpacman.com. You've got to spell it correctly. I get emails sometimes from people who say, David, Your membership website has a virus. If you spell my name wrong, it will take you to a different website that I don't know what's on it. Okay. Join Pacman, PAKMAN.com. Sign up, coupon code felony21. The code is such a big discount. It should be a felony, but it's legal. Okay. Felony21 is the coupon code. Sign up at joinpacman.com and we'll see you on today's bonus show.